I'm Austin Detweiler. I'm the managing editor of Philanthropy Daily. We're putting on this webinar. We're an online journal of news and opinion focused on the nonprofit sector. And our goal is to promote a strong civil society bolstered by thriving and growing nonprofits. To that end, we provide a lot of free resources to fundraisers to help them in their work. Since the pandemic began, we've been focusing really on strategic advice and recommendations related to fundraising during crisis. So hopefully you've heard about our weekly webinar. You can catch old episodes at philanthropydaily.com, and you can join us for the last 2 weeks on Thursdays at 2 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be covering social media and marketing next week, and then personnel and hiring the week after that. In addition to that general support, though, we wanted to reach out to higher education in particular, because all of you are facing unique challenges not quite like other nonprofits. The most obvious difference is that most colleges and universities are refunding room and board costs. So your average nonprofit is projecting revenue loss going forward, and you're all seeing the loss of money already received, often to the tune of millions of dollars. More than this, my own alma mater, for instance, emailed me a couple hours ago to announce that they're canceling all summer programs and conferences. For many schools, that's a lot of revenue, and I'm sure that's going to happen across the country. There's the question about enrollment next year, and the list here, I'm sure, goes on. And then prior to all of this, higher education was already in a state of some transition. Online education and distance learning was on the horizon in some ways and present in others, and we weren't sure how it was going to affect schools. The student loan bubble was growing, schools were closing, some alumni were saving schools that announced they were closing, and prognosticators and numbers were projecting how many schools would close and how soon. Many of you, I'm sure we'll hear more about this today, were probably already predicting the looming birth dearth and the nearly inevitable enrollment declines that are already approaching. So while many schools are growing and thriving, higher ed is nevertheless a fraught environment, and this pandemic certainly makes things harder for you. At the same time, though, higher ed is unique in a fortunate way. Colleges and universities enjoy a large and extremely committed donor base. So thousands, if not tens of thousands, of individuals each year go into the workforce feeling a debt of gratitude and a strong sense of identification with the nonprofit you're fundraising for. So all that to say, you're in a unique space with unique assets and facing the current crisis in a unique way. So most of you should have just received some amount of support from the government relief bill if you accept government support. That'll be helpful, but it won't completely solve the challenges you're facing, I'm sure. And indeed, it may distract from addressing some real issues in higher ed funding that should be addressed. So that's what we're here to discuss today with the help of Philip Brock and Lynn Hubert. Before I introduce our panelists and hand it off to them, I want to encourage everyone to start sending questions in. None of us is here as an expert with all the answers or some magic solution to the problems we're facing, because none of us have seen a pandemic before. Our goal today is to leverage shared experience, wisdom, intelligence, and then to think strategically how to respond to these challenges that all of you are facing as higher ed fundraisers. So if you just drag your mouse right over the video screen, there is a Q&A tool and a chat box down there. All your questions are private, so feel free to send them in. We'll get to as many as we can. And before that, Phil and Lynn have some remarks about what they're seeing now and how they're beginning to respond to the situation at hand. So to introduce each of our speakers today, Phil Brock is the Vice President of College Relations for Belmont Abbey College. Before this, Phil was one of the founders of the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America, where he also served as Assistant Dean for 7 years and led the campaign to raise over $70 million. Prior to the higher ed world, Phil worked with Mobil Oil, Ernst & Young, and helped found the SQAD company, where he also obtained several patents. Phil's experience spans market expansion, mergers and acquisitions, integrated communication, and of course, higher education fundraising. Lynn Hubert is the Director of Regional Development at Notre Dame. Lynn brings more than 25 years of fundraising experience in higher ed, both state and private institutions, including Conception Abbey, St. Gregory's University, University of Missouri, Utah State, And she's been recognized for assisting with moving teams and cultures forward with values-based leaderships. She works mostly with individuals and family capable of making major and principal gifts, as well as philanthropic advising and appropriately strategic planning and transformative gift structures today. Lynn also completed a doctoral degree at the University of Missouri-Columbia in higher education leadership and policy analysis. Her dissertation focused on women's motivations for giving and involvement on advisory councils and strategic university initiatives. Finally, Justin Streif is joining us. Justin is a partner with American Philanthropic, our co-host today. AmPhil is a full-service strategic consulting firm for nonprofits. Prior to joining American Philanthropic, Justin served for several years as the Director of Development with the Foundation for Economic Education. And there he oversaw an average annual growth of 30% in contributions revenue. And Justin also led the fundraising program for Goldwater Institute and has directed dozens of political campaigns, PACs, and nonprofits across the country. To date, Justin's involved in raising well over $100 million through major gifts, capital campaigns, direct mail, and much else. So with that, I'm going to hand it right over to you, Phil. Phil will get us started, and then we can pass it off to Lynn, and then we'll go into Q&A. So please send your questions as you have them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Austin. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you here virtually. Just echoing what Austin had said, you know, we're in a time when I don't think there's any experts, right? This is none of us alive have seen anything like this. So we're kind of taking the experiences we have and doing the best we can to try to figure out what are the best approaches at this point. So I give it in that spirit. You know, I have lived through, you know, I was, development was a second career for me but now it's more than half of my career. And you know, I was in the public phase of a campaign, just launched the public phase of a campaign, and when I was running a foundation in Chicago and 9/11 hit. And then fast forward, I was running the development office for a high school, private high school here in Washington, D.C. And we were probably about a year into a public phase, and the 2008 market crash hit. So I'm taking some of the experiences from those experiences. but even then, this is unlike that. You know, to say, you know, one of the things that's nice about working at colleges, right, is we have access to, you know, economists and experts across the board. And I've been talking with some of the economists from the Bush School and from my current role at Belmont Abbey, and more, you know, some of my early thoughts at the outset is the speed of this change, right? We've shut down the entire economy worldwide, you know, overnight. And that more and more, my bigger concern than the actual pandemic is this unemployment. What does 30 million people unemployed look like? And as unprecedented as that number is, you know, what is $10 trillion of stimulus thrown at it between the Fed and other government programs look like? So we don't know, and that's the uncertainty we're trying to work through. The general theme of my approach, strategically and practically, has been, you know, to focus on the relationship piece of what we do. You know, I just took this job at Belmont Abbey in February 1st, and they had a recommendation to change the name of the office from College Relations to either Advancement or Development. And when they made the offer, the president asked me, you know, do you want to make a change? I said, no, let's keep it College Relations, because I want that focus, that what we really are about is relationships, and those relationships then lead to philanthropy. So those introductory remarks, let me just give a couple other just my thoughts. Early takeaways is I do think one of the things going to come out of this is going to show our over dependence on major gifts versus the focus on the smaller gifts. I wrote a piece for American Philanthropy in the past week. Some of you may have seen that, you know, basing on a study that was done by the Chronicle of Philanthropy and the Chronicle of Higher Education a couple of years ago, that, you know, we're all doing really well in the major gifts and principal gift area, but we've had dramatic declines in the total number of donors in the smaller gifts, and that's the future pipeline. So I think taking this time to refocus on that. Major gifts are going to take a hit, right? You know, but they're not going to go to zero. I think that's the other thing to remember, right? So there's still going to be things to do there. The biggest challenge will be what I call, even with those who are not financially struggling because of these economic times, is the rest experience what I call a psychological poverty, and figuring out ways to have those conversations and get over that. is going to be key. But just to remember, the other thing I was talking a little bit about earlier was just dealing with the senior class. One of my favorite statistics in higher education fundraising is that about 90% of your cash will come in from alumni that are 30 years out or longer. It's an interesting number. If you haven't looked at that, look at it. I guarantee it'll be within a couple of percentage points at your institution. This is the cash that comes in. And what is it? They don't wake up 30 years later and fall in love with the institution. What happens is that 30 years out, right, they're statistically at their peak for earning potential and so forth. So the relationship, so think a lot about the relationship with those people that aren't there yet, including our seniors. The senior class. There's been a lot of talk about what's happening with this senior class and the conversations about the refunds and what they're going to remember. It's interesting at Belmont Abbey, interestingly enough, the 50th year reunion class we were planning for, the class of 1970, had their reunion canceled because of a bomb threat. You can imagine what was happening in the country in the late 60s and 1970, and so they couldn't walk. And so we've kind of tied that together, having this 50th year anniversary class communicate with the current class, saying this is not an ideal situation, but things are going. But working on that class, I know we've all been communicating a lot, right? And I think one thing, and Austin talked about the challenges of higher education. With the online education, the demographic issue coming up. But I am very long and high on residential traditional higher education. And I think one of the things not yet, right, we're still in the pain period, but in time, we have to use everything that's happening to remind people. The story I was telling before any of this happened is, in the turn that all of our institutions are 150-year plus institutions for the most part. So this country was less than 100 years old, and we realized that we need to build a higher education, a world-class higher education system if we were going to compete in the world. The Land Grant Act, think of the value of doing that, and the gift that Rockefeller gave and Marshall Fields gave to form the University of Chicago is probably $1 billion in today's dollars, right? We understood this, and we're living with the dividends of building that system. I think we need to remind people at the right time that who are the people who are solving the problems that are happening right now? Where did all these nurses go to school? Where these doctors, these people that are picking this vaccine? It's a great testament to the American system of government and the free market, but it's also a great testament to higher education. And we should, at the right time, take some credit for that and make that case in our communications. The other point I want to make at the outset on the communications is, I think we're all, I don't know if people are familiar with, the case, the Council for Advancement in Schools and Education, the double meaning, copy and steal everything. It has been interesting to see how quickly we're all doing the same things. Everyone set up a fund and we're out there and we're videos, and this is great, but I'm getting a little nervous. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal recently about the companies, because people are getting messages from their grade school, their high school, their own alma mater, their kids' school, and every company, they've got a video from a CEO of every company they've ever been on the list for, and they're saying that with the companies, the unsubscribe rates are starting to go up. So I want to caution people to be a little bit worried, to be a little bit look out for kind of COVID-19 over communication and people getting kind of just overly stressed out by getting too many messages on it. Along those same lines, I played football in high school, and I had a coach, who would, have you close your eyes and imagine before the game. Imagine having the fumble, picking it up and running it in, and there's something about thinking positive. And in the same respect, I put that same challenge to my staff at our most recent, what are now virtual staff meetings. Is yes, you're all coming to me with great ideas. Let's do this, to respond in this moment. But I challenge them: would you start to imagine normalcy? Start to think about what it's going to be like when you go back to see your donors. Because I don't think we don't get that vision in there too, and even I said it, my major gift donors, imagine what it's like to be back in front of your donors and talking to them as if none of this happened. Start to think about that. And even my individual donors, give me the plan. We got a plan for, who knows, there's an outside chance we may still be not open in the fall, whatever happens. All right, we got to do that. We'll plan for that. But we have to be thinking about normalcy and planning for getting back to normal sooner rather than later. A couple of last kind of thought I would say is the need to kind of do mass customization, both in major gifts and in our small gifts. I think we are one size fit all. That's what's going to be important now. These hits are going to be in very targeted areas. If you have any alumni or donors who are in tourism, in the oil industry, I mean, there's going to be 40% unemployment in the oil industry. And you need to know that. You need to know that about regions of the country. You need to know about, you don't know them better than ever. I think in 2008, that was a housing crisis. I had a donor, his business was driven by housing, and it was in a 7-figure pledge payment. I proactively called him and made the offer, do you need to change your pledge payments? Didn't wait for him to tell me. And I think that in that little thing that that he understood, that I understood his business, that his business would be impacted by this, and that I offered in advance that if you need to do that, we understand, was healthy. So we have to do this kind of, going back to relationships, we have to be personal and know each donor where the position. Some are doing better because of this, and because not under their own, because they just happen to be in areas of the economy that are benefiting because of restaurants are hurting, but if you're a Domino's pizza delivery place, your sales are going through the roof. So we have to know that individual situation as best ever. Well, that's just some introductory remarks, and I'll hand it over to Lynn now to give her thoughts.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. And thanks to American Philanthropic for inviting me to be involved on the panel. It's really a great topic, and we're addressing it in various ways, and yet with the same goal in mind. I hope to be able to give you some additional insights into higher education, fundraising, and provide some general remarks that can really be applied to all nonprofits. First, I hope that those of you tuning in today are well and your family and friends are healthy and safe also. I know this pandemic is touching each of us in a variety of ways, just as it's impacting our donors, alumni, and friends. What I'd like to begin with is the fact that even though fundraising has slowed down, building donor relationships should not. Strong relationships, as we all know, are the lifeblood of successful and sustainable fundraising. And at this time, when we're all working from home, as Phil mentioned, we're provided a really great opportunity to become and remain authentically relevant to our donor base. At the onset of this pandemic, I think we were all unsure of what to expect from our donors and our prospects. And I think in many ways, we're still a bit unsure. But the answer, a small piece of that answer anyway, has come to me time and again, and that's that we have to focus on being more relational now than ever before. Knowing full well that the transactional aspect of our work and our relationships will soon follow and will be stronger due to the manner in which we approach our donors in the present moment. I've noticed, even after speaking to Austin within the past couple of weeks, I've noticed that the level of engagement among our teams and their donors has increased as the weeks pass, which is a great sign for our industry. People really do want to hear from us at this time and want to support the organization we represent and for which they have great passion. We want to keep the door open with our donors, even if it's not the right time to make the ask. Regarding gifts, we're taking the approach that if we were in the process of closing a gift before the pandemic, we're inviting donors cautiously to continue the process and sign agreements and move them forward if they so wish. But of course, many have decided to delay that process, and for very good reasons. History shows that organizations that reduce fundraising during times of crisis face a really difficult future in fundraising, whereas those that remain the course come out stronger. And Notre Dame is remaining the course in different ways. So how and why are we doing this at Notre Dame? We're really implementing an approach of creativity and innovation over perfection right now. We're asking ourselves if something that we've instituted during this time is sustainable. Is it a sustainable activity for us to continue after the crisis subsides? And that answer will come in time. We still don't know. But we vowed to be bold and to try new approaches as we're able. One piece of advice I can offer is to get grounded in your mission and plan and take action from that point. And that's nothing new than what we're doing already, even before the pandemic struck. And this next piece isn't really a bold piece of advice because I'm sure we're all doing this. And I completely agree with Phil that we have to really look to overload of messaging to our constituency. But right now we are calling each person within our portfolio, taking copious notes for our contact reports so that we can, as I've mentioned before, remain close. Let them know that how much they're valued, the relationship and the partnership with the university is valued, and continue this so that we can set a foundation for future giving. We are, like many of you, I'm sure, sending handwritten cards, mostly with Notre Dame photos on them. And the idea there is to bring Notre Dame into their home. You know, if they place it on their refrigerator or if they keep it on their coffee table, you know, Notre Dame is in the forefront of their mind. Also texting, Zoom calls for those who are open to it. The next line of action is our teams just completed our annual planning process, which spans a 3-year time frame. It's a great time to really dig into strategy and review those with your teams, with your researcher, with anyone who is associated, you know, with gift processing for your area, for your organization. And, you know, as we're approaching this 3-year time frame, we're taking on the mindset right now that it's business as usual, with the caveat that we'll likely need to adjust our goals and expectations just as we're adjusting daily to the change that's going on around us. In fundraising, it's important that we focus on always adding value to our conversations. And one way that we're doing this is by inviting select donors to tune into live webinars and YouTube interviews with our president, our provost, athletic director, chief investment officer, student life and career services representatives. And our constituency has an opportunity to ask questions, to submit questions, and this has been an excellent personal touch and has been very well received. We're also building digidecks of information that can be shared and viewed electronically that are based on a few areas that we're focusing on right now and that I'll go into a little later, or that we may be focusing on in the future. I think this entire situation, as we've heard on several webinars, is going to change the face of fundraising in our industry in many ways. Our marketing and storytelling team is working on a project about Notre Dame alumni, parents, and friends on the front lines, gathering stories from those that are in the belly of the beast, really, and fighting COVID-19. And we're in the process of exploring the use of a broadcast to tell these stories and promote the need to raise funds for research at Notre Dame on COVID-19, as well as a student emergency relief fund that has risen up out of this crisis. This fund is focusing on securing expendable gifts and to be allocated towards financial aid. Our president, Father John Jenkins, said and really vowed that we'll make certain that no student will be turned away from attending or returning to Notre Dame due to financial need. And we're anticipating a large increase in financial need for the approaching academic year. The fund will also be used to assist with needs associated solely to the students, solely to the student body. So we're very, very excited about this fund in that it's going totally to the student body. Within what we call the Idea Center at the university, we have an Innovation and Entrepreneurship Lab that's creating and distributing 200 PPE masks per day. And this project has offered a way for donors to become involved. They're asking us, you know, what is Notre Dame doing to fight this pandemic? And so we're preparing our teams with solid and well-informed answers that continues to really evolve and build every week. The amount of activity that's going on with regard to the messaging for COVID, as well as the response to COVID, not only at the university, but nationwide, has been absolutely fantastic. In other areas of the university, like Notre Dame Career Services, Our team there is connecting recent graduates with Notre Dame alumni who might be hiring in industries, as Phil said, that haven't been hit as hard as other areas. And these students represent future donors to the university and will hopefully recall a time when Notre Dame rose to the occasion and assisted them in their job search during the pandemic. I spoke last week to a Notre Dame father who said that his daughter just received a phone call from a consulting firm in Chicago, and she had had this job locked in for several months, and they said, "We're sorry, we're on a hiring freeze." So we need to rise to the occasion and be able to assist in any way we can. Another way we're preparing for conversations with our donor base is via research. This is not my idea, but I think it's a fantastic idea. Our research team has received multiple requests from our team, overall team, for information about how certain big industries, companies, and benefactors are being impacted by COVID. So we put together a list of prospects that we believe to be doing reasonably well despite the current economic environment. And it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but it's going to assist our team in considering who has been less adversely impacted. I'll close by saying what I would like for you all to remember is that tucked away in the heart of each person is the desire to be a force for good in the world. When crises occur, people don't stop caring or engaging or giving, but the framework in which they exist and they think about giving may change. It's our job to be present to advise them through this change. So talking with your donors about your organization, its mission, and its need is paramount. And it's key to the life and growth of your mission overall.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lynn. And thank you, Phil. That was great. We have several questions lined up here, so we'll just jump right in, and feel free to take whatever you like, and I can pass them off when it's appropriate. A first one here. A lot of us are starting to get stimulus checks from the government right now. Do you recommend any use of messaging around that to donors? Can you ask the donor for a stimulus check if they don't need it right now?
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I think I've thought about that. There's another issue that has come up at our college is when you do the refunds, do you give an option for if some of the families are going to get the refund and not need it? Do you give them an option to be able to check a box or whatever, donate a portion of that back? We haven't made a decision on that yet. I mean, I don't know if you could time it to do it at the same time. I don't know if I think I would err on the side of caution right now that I am a little bit concerned from the colleges that the amount of press that the funds we are getting is receiving. That people are, we have to make sure we have that make sure we're educating our donors appropriately what the actual cost we are getting, but they're hearing that, well, if you're small enough, we're small enough, we have less than 500 employees as an institution, we even qualify for the paycheck protection, but then there's the earmark for higher education and stuff. So that's my only caution on doing that, is that some people think, well, I would time and ask to happen at the same time that those are going out, and maybe in a suggested amount that's close to the $1,200 for individuals. Again, if you knew your data well enough to know who was not hurting, but it's hard to know that right now.
Yeah, I would agree. We're definitely not orchestrating any kind of a campaign around the stimulus check, but we have had, I know personally of one person who received or is in the process of receiving a stimulus check and sent it in for the Student Emergency Relief Fund. So I think we're not being proactive in this, but we're being definitely receptive to this if it is something that our benefactors are interested in doing.
And I'll suggest there's another interesting one to look at. You can withdraw $100,000 out of your 401k penalty free right now, and if you pay it back over the next 3 years, there's no tax liability at all. So if you had a donor who wasn't in need, didn't need to do that, The question is, do you suggest to them they withdraw 100,000? They're basically, their pledge payment is paying it back tax-free. I don't, we've looked at that from just a pure accounting standpoint, but then we started looking at the ethical piece of it. Does the law intend that you're only to do that if you're in the need? Obviously, you would only present this to someone who has enough, like the individuals who are rolling over. You look at the people in your database who are donating their minimum distributions or their rollovers. Right? Those are people who have put enough in their 401k that they don't need the distribution. They may be candidates to talk about. There may be an opportunity around these withdrawals without penalty.
Can I and I'll just add one more idea. That's a great idea, Phil. We're also speaking to many individuals who have donor advised funds, whether they're held at the university or outside the university. And if they are willing to make a distribution to those from their donor advised fund, we're speaking to them about an area that they would like to allocate it to. Again, the relief fund, potentially unrestricted funding for the university so that Father John can allocate it to the area of greatest need that he sees. Of course, right now, the area of greatest need that he sees is the Student Emergency Relief Fund.
Phil, you mentioned the press that schools are getting about the relief that they're receiving. And we had a question come in about that. How would you recommend using that in donor messaging? Do you want to specifically bring the number to your major donors and let them know the delta between relief you're getting and what you need, or do you want to avoid that altogether?
I think, look, we're in the age of transparency, where the greater you get in more trouble by not telling someone, or people feeling they've kept something to you. It's like they say, the cover up is worse than the crime. It's not communicating is worse than the crime. So I think you as much as I think you got to be open that this is the potential impact. I mean, I've seen schools go as far, a lot of schools are self-insured. I've even seen some schools, most of us, I think now are self-insured to some extent, and, even sharing with their donors, there's going to be an impact. What's the impact on our self-insurance in terms, especially if we're in a region of a hotspot, with the call. So no, I think you want to be as transparent as possible, with where you're at. So.
For schools that are seeing not enough support from that, and then projecting a drop in enrollment and a drop in fundraising revenue, are you expecting people to tap into endowments? Are you recommending that, or are there other solutions to meet budgetary needs?
Are you speaking to endowments within the university itself?
So I think the university's general endowment, so not specific professorship endowments, but the overall endowment.
I think the answer to that question is dependent upon how the endowment has been directed. If it's directed at the discretion of the university, that certainly may happen. Again, I'll echo what Phil says about transparency, allowing the owner of that endowment, if you will, that sits within the Notre Dame endowment to know, and calling them and asking them if this is something that we could use, if there's a specific resource need that we have in mind that we would like to direct it toward. Most definitely, I could see that happening.
Let me tell you another thing. Well, on the endowment, a lot of schools over the years had set up some form of quasi endowment based on things, years they might have had a surplus. So I think a lot of people are going to maybe look at the quasi endowments first. Another thing that comes to mind with that is if you have another interesting conversation. This is so, again, unprecedented, 100-year event. You could consider going to donors who have put you in their estate and may be in a position to accelerate that. That's another. I think that's a conversation with the right donor that they would be willing to have, or even a portion of that. Because they say again, if they're in a position to say, yeah, I know you intended to give this to us when you depart, which hopefully is years from now, but this is an emergency. Is there a way that we could reconsider the structure of that gift, that a portion, or especially if they were going to give it to you in the endowment, would you be willing to consider paying us this year what that proceed would be as if we had it? So that's another thing I think you're going to have to get creative and think about having those type of conversations.
I think another idea, again, would be to ask those individuals that have, potentially a charitable remainder trust or something of a life income plan, and any of the proceeds off of the charitable remainder trust, if they would, again, send those into the university for whatever need the organization may have at that time.
I think at least there's a subtle point maybe think about it. Let's also on estate gifts. I mean, data, the story went around, I'm sure most of us saw it. I think it was University of Mississippi or some school of Mississippi that they had a negative story going around because they had an unfortunate email go out. And I've seen a lot of people grab onto that and say, oh, stop everything estate. I would not stop everything estate giving conversations. We just be careful. I mean, that was one news story. You have to do everything right and be sensitive to the issues that are going on. But I don't think we should take that somewhat anecdotal story that someone had one misfortune of the timing of an email, and then as a group not have those conversations. And obviously it's difficult because the idea of everyone's mortality is kind of more on front of mind right now, because people are being touched by this health event. But I don't think that you should not stop having estate gift conversations.
Great. You're stealing all the questions that I'm trying to line up, Phil.
Okay.
The one last one that I'll expand on that a little bit. So don't avoid it entirely. And both of you mentioned going to specific donors that you know. Do you advise, though, mass communications around estate giving? We know there's a lot of research on it. I read something like 30% more people are updating wills right now. So it kind of seems like the time is right to say something to your entire donor base.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that saying something to the entire donor base has some merit to it. But I also believe that we would take a look at our top tier of donor base and making certain that that they're being reached out to and given some opportunities with regard to planned giving for the university and becoming involved in that. Right now, I think we're taking the approach that there's not a hard sell on anything, but there is definitely a conversation to be had on everything if the donor is open to it.
Yeah, you can't with mass communication, don't let the exception be the rule. You can't do anything mass communication and not risk offending someone even in normal times. So, but again, yeah, you got to be prudent in how you say it and when. We've gone in the mail. We're continuing. A lot of people went in the email with the relief fund. We've gone into the mail with the relief fund. But for instance, we pulled the whole state of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. We just weren't going to mail, given the timing and kind of like sometimes when you pull when a hurricane's come through or whatever. So yeah, and I think you're going to have to watch it. I think I would say, if I didn't say this earlier, we're very early in this. This is moving so quickly that a week from now, we could be having completely different recommendations. So this is something where you got to really be watching closely how things are developing.
Do you expect to see any decline or change in response rate for direct mail, whether it's cultivation or solicitation letters?
Well, I think we've had a lot of conversations about that. We'll see. We just dropped, last week, so we'll see how it plays out. But who knows? I mean, more people at home. When? I mean, almost just as a test, just a professional in the field, I'm interested, right? When can you ever say that you've mailed something when the entire country's at home? I mean, you're always dealing with a certain percentage of people on vacation or busy or weak. And having more time in their hands. So I don't know the answer to that question. That's one of the things we're going to learn. But I think it should be in the mail. I don't think you should avoid, we don't know. We've asked the question, yes, people are going to read their mail. Are people going to be afraid to go to the post office and mail back a check? or even, is there going to be a delay in the typical response times in the mail because people are letting their mail sit for 14 days? Some people are doing it. They're letting their mail sit, cleaning it and letting it sit in the garage before they bring it in. So yeah, we're gonna learn.
Yeah, we're seeing just with our clients and at American Philanthropic, and we work with a lot of caging companies, check processors around the country, and it's some interesting data that we've seen and heard from these cagers in March and already in the first 17 days or 16 days of April, which is basically the volume of donations is down. The number coming in is down. However, interestingly, the total amount of donations has actually gone up single-digit percentages, about 7% from one caging company, and others are reporting 20 to 25% increases in overall average gift on direct mail. So the number coming in is fewer, but the amounts coming in are actually higher, interestingly. So people are stepping up and they're actually giving more. Clients I've worked with directly, I've seen that on the major gift side, and I've seen that on the direct mail side of people are stepping up. They're digging in a little bit deeper if they can, extra $25 or the extra $25,000. So, but as you said, Phil, I mean, absolutely, being in the mail is important, but it's so early. If you're dropping mail right now, you still got to wait a few weeks to see what it looks like, and that'll help inform your next mailing. But what's critical about this mail is be sensitive to what's going on. You don't want to overplay the COVID situation, which I think, Phil, you were saying earlier on, but you want to recognize it and be sensitive to what's going on. It's a real issue for people, so acknowledge that. Anyway, there's some interesting data on the direct mail and the giving, but it's TBD. It'll continue to flow in here for another month. Like you said, we're still early in on this, so these numbers could change.
Do any of you have thoughts on spending more money to steward donors with special mailings? So, Phil, you've been pushing knowing your donors well. If you know a donor has a dog, can you send a dog bowl or something else like that to really engage them in a strong way?
Yeah, I mean, you got to. In fact, the people who are doing this. That's one. I think Austin might have said this to me earlier in the conversation. You know, people who are doing it right going into this are going to be all right, and people who maybe weren't stewarding. I mean, I want to even just give a shout out to Notre Dame. I'm a Notre Dame alum, and within the past year, they started. I don't know if I'm only one, a group of subgroup guys. They started sending a daily gospel reflection to me, written by. I never signed up for this, that I'm aware of this, you know, written by a different member of the community, from alumni to students to faculty, staff. And, you know, I kind of just put it aside, and it's interesting. I wasn't reading it that often, but I wasn't deleting it or unsubscribing. And since when this kicked in and I'm home and we're kind of all being forced into a degree of contemplation, I'm reading it every day now. Right. And I don't have access to church. I mean, it's amazing. And it just was there. So, yeah, I think looking for those ways, you know, we're Benedictine, right? You know, so we're reminding people, you know, Benedict was the patron saint of social distancing, right? I mean, he came up with the idea. So you know, and having a little bit of fun with that and reminding the people of what they, you know, I've been thinking, I've been thinking about it. People putting different challenges out there. I was just going to put a challenge out there that just said, hey, we want the alum, pick up the phone and call somebody who you went to school with at the Abbey and haven't talked to in 10 years. Just do it. Everyone's at home.
Right.
You know, and you know, just challenging them, like, to and connect them to so they obviously that question is yes, you can't over communicate from a stewardship standpoint right now, I think.
I agree, Phil, and I'm glad that I think it's Faith in D that you're probably talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, we sent it out to everyone, and then you had it was an opt-in immediately, and and then you could opt out if you so chose to do so. But I know the number of hits on Faith in D has increased substantially. The other thing that we did as part of stewardship going into the Triduum and the Easter weekend is we sent emails out to, especially all those people that we knew very well, the Easter Mass schedule, and any rosaries that were happening on campus, any events that may, you know, be focused on faith-based initiatives, we sent to them as well. So we're getting very creative in how we are stewarding our donors. You know, our budgets have been frozen. And so just as many of us, we're not traveling, we're not sending out tokens of appreciation, but the token of appreciation is really us as fundraisers and how we're reaching out to people. And with Zoom Zoom calls or emails. And, I personally sent emails out to everyone after talking to them, and then also send another email leading up to, again, Easter week, with the slate of activities that were going on through the CSC congregation. And I think I had at least 50% respond with, thank you for sending this. We're in a time of reflection and renewal, and that was a wonderful stewardship piece for us.
How do you recommend keeping peer-to-peer alumni fundraisers engaged right now, especially if they can't go to meetings and if they're uncomfortable making solicitations for the time being?
I'm not using, I guess the volunteers, I have to broaden the question a little bit. I'm familiar with the peer-to-peer alumni, fundraising idea, and I've never implemented it specifically, but if I can broaden that a little bit to like volunteer groups, we've had a lot of conversation about what do you do with reunion committees, and what do you do with, all those type of things. You'd be getting together, sub boards for, I know at my previous place, they had the Bush School had their last board meeting, virtually, obviously. So, again, I think you want to keep those people engaged, and but the asking, if you're actually having those people do asking, everything we've talked about pertains to them too. As a volunteer making the ask, it's all the same concerns that we've been talking about.
I think relative to Notre Dame, what's happening with, again, Zoom calls, our deans are reaching out to all their advisory councils, and you would not believe the amount of peer-to-peer fundraising that's going on as the advisory council members begin to talk with each other about what they're doing right now. How are they assisting Notre Dame? How do they want to help move a specific fund forward? So there's some peer-to-peer fundraising that's going on there just through the communication that's happening with the deans and amongst themselves. And I can't attest to this, but I would venture to guess that the trustees are also operating in the exact same way, and looking at, okay, what is Notre Dame doing in response? How can we be involved? And sometimes, I think many times, that's the richest form of fundraising that can be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lynn, this is a good question for you, because we actually talked about this a little bit before, and I feel actually you mentioned something on the phone to me. How do you recommend maintaining strong relationships, especially with current seniors right now, so that they can give down the line?
Sure. What I have been doing personally is, making phone calls to the current seniors that I know on a personal basis, and not only making a phone call to them, but also making a phone call to their parents as well. Our student affairs office has been extremely involved in reaching out to our Notre Dame seniors, and communicating with them, of course, not only through phone calls, but inviting them into Zoom meetings. And also career services. Again, career services is taking a look at, who in our senior class is going into grad school, who it was going to go into industry but now cannot. And we're reaching out to those seniors to try to assist them in any way that we possibly can. Notre Dame has delayed graduation to spring of 2021. And that's been communicated out to everyone in the senior class and their parents. And so we're planning for that. And we don't have, right now, we don't know what the response is. We haven't been, and if we do know, it has not been shared with us, but we anticipate a large amount of, or a large percentage of the senior class will come back for graduation.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we're working on we're going to do a virtual deferral of the degree, conferring of the degrees, and then something in the fall, maybe with the class of 70, kind of having them both get their graduation. I did another example at Catholic University. I saw it was great there. Little simple thing. The basketball coach, and it's not just seniors, obviously, all different grades. The basketball coach each day has been interviewing through Zoom one of his players, and just kind of a 5-question type thing. They just ask them all the same 5 questions. And it's been for me, it was a great little feed. I get to see some of the students, the coaches, and also for the school. And they're obviously, I'm seeing it because they're promoting it out. But, the sports teams, doing more of that, simple thing, very simple. And it's also helping him probably stay in touch with his students. But
we have about 8 minutes left, so let's go as quickly as we can through the last few questions here. So one of the ones here, one of the strengths of American higher education is the diversity of about 4,000 schools across the country. Do you see differences in how the pandemic is going to affect different institutions, so liberal arts schools versus public schools versus Ivies? And then are there differences in how they're responding or should respond?
I think we're seeing it run the gamut across the entire nation, honestly. I mean, if you take a look at, what's happening in the large system schools, if you will, the cuts that are being made within the system schools are just as, or I should say the cuts that are being made at the smaller universities and colleges are just as detrimental as they are, in the larger system schools. I think this is one of those times when we can honestly say we're all in this together, because I don't think there is going to be one college or university that has been adversely affected. Take your pick of whatever adversely affected means, whether it's salary freezes, hiring freezes, cuts in pay, furloughs, cuts in athletic department teams. It just, again, it runs the gamut. So I don't think that anyone is going to be immune to this.
Here's another one. Justin, this might be good for you because I know we've talked about it recently. Are foundations working as normal and worth putting extra focus on right now? And are there any COVID-19 specific grants to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, foundations are, for the most part, working normally. There's a lot of rules that go into what they have to give away, how much every year. But the easiest way to understand it is 5%, their minimum distribution of 5% of their assets from the last fiscal year. There's, again, some other things that go into that. But foundations are legally required to give away money, and none of the CARE Acts or anything like that reduces that or increases that. There's a whole nother debate about that, but there's nothing changed. They still need to give away money this year. And so absolutely keep reaching out to them and be sensitive to what they're doing, what's going on. So if you're reaching out to them, ask them if they have COVID-specific fund set up or funding set up. Look at their website, make sure you understand if they've got anything going on. Reach out and let them know how COVID is impacting what your university is doing. But there's also tons. You can just basically, we can maybe drop some links here, but you can just go to Google and type in foundations that are increasing giving. There's hundreds and hundreds of foundations that have stepped up and said, we're doubling giving, or we're going to give more, or whatever it is. So this is absolutely not the time to let up on foundations. I would argue it's actually the time to probably step on the gas a little bit.
Next one, you're in the middle of a campaign right now. Do you pause it? Do you keep going? Do you adjust? Do you pivot? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think, well, what is a pause? I mean, I could say, yes, you pause it, but I don't know what that means. All right. I mean, if you're in the public phase, of a campaign, I think you have to move forward and probably extend it is what's going to happen, right? It may take you, but if you're in the silent phase, I think it's the more difficult question, right? Yeah. If you're at varying, stages, you're maybe just in the study phase. Do you continue? If you're into some of the asks, but you're not at the goal you want to be in the silent phase, and you might have been ready to have a big launch party in the fall or whatever, or you're there, that would be even the most challenging question. If you're already in the public phase, I wouldn't say that you're pausing or you're closing, but just understand you effectively are pausing. I don't think you need to advertise that, but you're going to, in reality, extend it maybe to get to your goal. If you're in the silent phase, that's the bigger challenge, because you may have time to readjust your goal and still go public. but obviously when you go public is going to be a real hard thing to put in stone, knowing with all the uncertainty around.
What's this other one here? Are there unusual tax benefits for corporate giving and major gifts due to the pandemic? And if so, any advice on how to frame the tax benefits as positive for donors?
I'll just go quickly here, and we can send around a link maybe afterward. There are a couple benefits, and like I said, we can send around a link, but charitable gift limits have been lifted, so it's now 100% of AGI. It's usually 60%. So that's one thing. So if somebody's really looking for tax benefit, well, boy, they lifted the limit, and that's great. Smaller donors, non-itemizers, so typically not major donors, they're all eligible for the $300 universal now, and that's permanent. That's not a temporary thing. That's permanent. There is also an increase if you get corporate giving. There is an increase in the limit on cash contributions from 10 to 25%. So that's actually, if you get corporate giving, corporate cash gifts, there is actually an increase on that. So there are a couple things here. Corporate giving, I think I saw that in that question. What should you count on? In my view, I'd be curious if you guys think differently, Phil or Lynn, but corporations are hurting right now. A lot of them are getting federal funding. They're probably not looking to increase charitable giving. And if they are, they're probably going to be focusing on health and human services. So the corporate fundraising is probably going to hurt a little this year.
All right, I have one last question for Phil quickly, because I know you have a good answer to it. Is it worth breaking out your portfolio by industry the donor is and thinking through strategies based specifically on their industry?
Yes, it is. That's kind of what is this mass customization idea I mean, there really are. There are, like I said, there are restaurants that are doing well. There are restaurants doing poorly. Obviously, anything tourism, like I said, hotels, tourism, and that's going to be long thing. But I mean, some of the banks are actually, they make money on all these loans they're processing through the SBA. I mean, it's so that the banks are actually doing well. So I think you need to know. And obviously healthcare. There's going to be some people that are going to do well, and yes, you have food. Some retail is doing extremely well. So you need to know each person, how this is affecting them, and affecting them also. Obviously, I think Lynn said something earlier about the heart. I mean, like no, there are people. I mean, we have a donor who is he supplies the restaurants. And he's obviously hurt a little bit, but he's well enough on in his business that I got to believe in his heart that this is an industry he's been very close to, that has been dramatically affected. And are there things we're doing that can help that industry? A scholarship fund for the restaurant workers' children. I mean, just as a random idea. So knowing that industry specific and how this is affecting them is really important.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you, Phil, for your remarks, your answers. Thank you, Justin, for your time. And thanks everyone for joining us. I hope this was helpful. If you have more questions, feel free to send them in. We're happy to answer them by email later. You can reach us. My email is just austin@americanphilanthropic.com. You should have gotten something from me. We have 2 more weeks of our Fundraising During Crisis webinar. If you'd like to join that, you can watch the past ones at Philanthropy Daily. We will send the recording of this around soon, and along with that will be a link to a survey. And we would love to hear your response to how you thought this went so we can tailor future ones. Good luck. There are a lot of resources on philanthropydaily.com to help you, but I know this is a strange time, and stay safe, and thanks for joining us.